Hi there, quilting friends. I'm Tiffany and this is Straight Stitching. I've been staring at these fabrics for a long time and I just simply can't bring myself to throwing them away. So today I'm going to be using them to transform them into a really cute placemat. If you're anything like me, you have tons of scraps all over. I have at least tried to gain some organization. So I have all of my scraps in Ziploc bags based on colors. And I'm just beginning to start to drown in these things. And again, I don't want to throw them away. I definitely know that they can be used to create any number of really cute items. So again, today I am going to be turning my orange scraps into placemats. I've already completed a blue placemat and a red placemat. The outcome is very scrappy. So this is the blue placemat. This is the red placemat. And so I'm going to be doing an orange one today. So follow along with me. It's really a stress-free method of sewing. For this particular project, you're going to need, of course, the scraps that you're going to be using. I'm going to be using orange and white. So I have my orange scraps here on the table that you've seen already. And I have my white scraps here in another trusty Ziploc bag. So I'm going to be combining these scraps to create the placemat. The placemat will finish at approximately 18 inches by 14 inches. So in addition to the scraps, you're also going to need a piece of material for your backing. From this scrap project, I'm using fat quarters. So these are a couple of fat quarters that I have that I don't have a use for now. So I think that they're going to be really cute as the backing of these placemats. So it's not only going to allow me to use additional fabric in using up the fat quarters that I just had sitting around. This is the back of the blue placemat. It also then makes this placemat reversible. So on one side you'll have your color, and again today we're working on orange, and then on the flip side you'll have a really nice fat quarter depending on your selection. You're also going to need a base material. This is the material on which we're going to sew our scraps. Because the scraps are from various quilt patterns. Many of them are on the bias, so that means that they're stretchy. So to help them hold their shape, we're going to sew them onto 5-inch squares. This is also scrap material. Because I am using orange and white material, I'm going with a lighter colored square as my base, but you can use any scraps that you have, and actually, quite frankly, in any size that you like. But for this particular project, because the mats are going to finish at 18 by 14, we're using 12 5-inch squares as our base. And then the placemats will have 3 rows of 4 little 5-inch squares going across. So let's go ahead and get started. So as a recap for the materials that we're going to need, you're going to need 12 5-inch squares. They can be any color that you want. I'm using this old Christmas fabric. It is white, so you can use any color that you like. You're going to need, of course, your scrap materials. You'll need a pair of scissors, rotary cutter. You'll need your fat quarter that you're going to be using for your backing. I, again, am using just some fat quarters that I had left over from a quilt show that I attended that I'm not going to use for any other purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and use them in this project. And then you'll need batting. And also, because this is a scrappy project, I am using scrap batting. So this is a perfect opportunity if you have odd-sized pieces of batting laying around. You'll be able to lay them out and use them in this project with no issue. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to put these items aside. Okay, so we're going to get started. I have my base piece of material laid out here on my cutting board, and now you just want to really randomly grab pieces and lay them out on the base here. And you want to keep your scissors handy because you may need to cut the material down to size. Okay, so I'm going to just start with this orangish piece here. So I'm going to lay it out right side up. And then now I want to find a white piece or background piece of material that is approximately the same size. So I have this piece here, it's a bit longer, but I'm going to just cut it. And so you want to lay right sides together, lining up the edges, and it doesn't need to be perfect because this is a scrap project, and there's a lot of room to cover things up as you continue to layer piece on top of piece. So I'm going to now just take this square over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch 1/4 of an inch away from the edge here, and then I'll flip open the white piece, and we'll just keep layering on and building out our block. Okay, so I'm going to just sew these two pieces together using a 1/4 inch seam. And now I'm going to just flip over this white background piece and finger press it. I'm not going to iron these pieces flat until I have the entire square covered. So I'm really just going to continue to layer on. So I'll look for the next piece that can be used. And very much like a log cabin, we're just looking to build on one of the 4 sides of what we've already created here. So let's go with, say, this one. Okay, so I'm going to sew this piece on using a 1/4 inch seam. When you're selecting your pieces, you want to kind of audition them a little bit just to make sure that when you flip them, so you'll do your 1/4 inch seam and then you would flip it, you want to make sure that it's going to be providing the coverage that you're looking for. So this is going to leave a little bit of white space here that I'll cover up in my next go around, but I am going to use this piece. So I'm going to just sew it with the 1/4 inch seam. It can be a little bit time consuming selecting the next piece to use because you do want to make sure that you are going to cover the entire base square. So you can see for this one, I'm already starting to, when I'm piecing on my scraps, I'm already starting to go over the edges of the base material that we're using. And that's okay because once we're completed covering this entire base square, we are going to come back and trim it down back to a 5-inch square. So we'll take care of all of those pieces that are hanging over. So if you can see here, I've covered up, I would say the top corners of this particular square, but if you look really closely, you can see that there is a little bit of this corner that is not actually covered. Yes, you can see that. So you can handle that in one of two ways. You can either piece another small piece of material there, or you can leave it knowing that in the end we're going to trim the square down to 5 inches squared, and we already know that we have material hanging over on this side. So I think we'll be able to just shift where we're starting that 5-inch square so that we'll cut that corner off. And I'll show you what I mean when we get to the trimming portion. It's very much like abstract art, so we're just layering on piece after piece until we have the entire square covered. Okay, so you can see that I now have the entire base square covered with the exception of this little corner that I pointed out earlier. So the next step is I'm going to take this square to the iron and I'm going to press the material flat, and then I will come back and I'll show you how to trim the block. Okay, so the square and all of the scraps have been pressed completely flat. So you can see still that there's this corner here peeking out. And so now we're going to flip over this square and we're going to trim the block to 5 inches squared. So this is where I was mentioning that it doesn't matter that that tiny piece of the corner was not covered, because we'll just cut it off as part of the trimming. So I'm using my 5-inch square ruler and I'm going to just trim all of the edges off. Now at this point you're obviously creating more scraps, so you can decide to throw them back into the scrap pile or throw them away. Now for me, I don't want to throw away material, but there does just get to a point where the materials are too small for me to enjoy working with. So for these scraps, I'm going to just toss them. This one I'll probably keep. Okay, this one also keep. Okay, so now we have our 5-inch squared block. So it's really cute, very scrappy. The goal is to use up as much of this orange and white material as I can. This is block number 1. We have to make 12 more. So I'm going to make 1 more on camera, and then I'm going to speed up and come back once I have all 12 blocks completed, and then I'll show you how to piece them together to finish the process. Okay, so here is our second block. So I am going to go off camera and do the next 10 so that we will end with a total of 12 5-inch squares. And then we'll come back together and we will piece them in 3 rows of 4 and then we'll continue on with that process. So I'll meet you back here momentarily. Now that we have all 12 5-inch blocks completed, we're now going to lay out our placemat and then piece the 5-inch squares together using a 1/4-inch seam. So I'm just going to lay mine out here. So I have the 3 pieces basted together. I have my the top of the placemat. I'm using scrap batting. I was able to take a piece of scrap and cut it in half. So I'm using that. And then you can see here is the back of the placemat. So again, I'm just using a fat quarter that was laying around. I'm going to use straight line quilting to attach all of the pieces together. You of course can use whatever method is your favorite. I think that when you're doing small projects like this, it's a good opportunity to practice various stitching. So if you know whatever motifs you're working on, smaller pieces like this are a good opportunity to practice those stitches. So again, I'm going to do the straight line stitching and I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Placemat has been quilted. I used the straight line motif to do that. So this is the front of the placemat. Hopefully you can get a glimpse of what that looks like. Here is a peek at the back of it. So the next and final step is to attach the binding. And so I am going to machine bind like I do with all of my other quilting projects. And I'm going to, I usually go back and forth on how I do this, whether or not I attach the binding to the front or the back. Today I am going to attach it to the front and then wrap it around the back, and then I'm going to come back to the front to do a stitch in the ditch to do the final attachment. So so we're gonna just leave a bit of a tail on the binding, and this is gonna be used to attach the final piece when you come around. So let's make sure you have the raw edges lined up, and I'm going to use, I usually use a compensating foot to do my binding, so I'm going to go ahead and change the foot. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So if you can see that what this compensating foot does, it does allow for thicker material. There's a spring here on this foot or on the guide, and then I can bump the fabric up against the guide to make sure that my 1/4-inch seam ain't. Okay, so as we're nearing the edge of the mat, I'm going to just get this little seam gauge and mark off 1/4 of an inch. this is where I want to take my needle up to this point, and then I'm going to do a back stitch and break thread and then flip it over. So here we go. Okay. So now I'm just going to, hopefully you can see this. I have this binding tool that I made out of a piece of plastic. So I'm gonna wrap the binding around so I can create the 45-degree angle here. So you want to fold your binding back to create a 45-degree angle, and then you're going to flip the piece, the tail over, and line it up with the edge of the mat. Okay. And then you want to just hold that down with your hand, your finger, and then run it back through the sewing machine, but this time flipping the mat. And this is the same process that I use when I am doing my quilt binding. It's the same process, just a larger piece of material. Okay, so now I'm just going to go down this side. Lining up the edges. Okay, want to mark off 1/4 inch. Okay, and that is so. Okay, so now you're going to, we're rounding the side where we started, and I am going to sew past this area here because I'm at a point where I have reached where I have attached 2 pieces of material. So I just want to get beyond that, and then I will show you how to attach the 2 ends. Okay, great. So let me do a back stitch here. Okay, so you can see that I have reached my starting point where I now have an opening, and I have these 2 ends of the binding that need to be attached. And so how you do that is you want to overlap the two pieces of material, and you want to overlap it the same amount as the width of your binding strip. My binding strip is 2.5 inches, so I want to have it such that these 2 pieces overlap by 2.5 inches. So I'm gonna just cut one side. That's to get us started. Okay, and then because this is a shorter or smaller project, I'm going to pick apart some of these stitches so that I have more room to maneuver this other end of the strip. When you're doing this method with the quilt, it's a little bit easier because obviously your quilt is a lot larger. Okay, so here is where my bottom piece ends. So right about here where I have my seam ripper. So just about here. And so now I need to overlap this top material, this top end of the binding strip, 2.5 inches. So I'm going to just lay this flat. And then I'm going to draw a line here. Okay, so this line is where I need to cut this binding strip. Okay, and another trick that you can do is you can cut a little sliver of your binding strip, and then you can use this to lay out, to measure how much or how far over your two pieces of material will overlap. So that's just a trick so you don't have to pull your ruler back out. Okay, now we want to gather these two pieces and we're going to stitch them together. So I'm going to just pull this in a little because I need to have some room. Okay, I'm going to clip this. Okay, and so what you want to do is you want to open your binding strip and lay it out flat. And then you want to take your top piece and lay it on top of it. And you're going to create a T or a cross with your seams or with the fold. So this fold here is, once it's open and flat, and then I'm going to take the top material and I'm going to lay that seam or that fold over the other part of the strip, and it will form a T. It's a little bit tricky, and especially when you're doing it on such a small project, because there's not a lot of room to maneuver. So I'm going to pin this side up as well, just so I can get the material closer to each other. Okay, so now I'm going to fold this over. Okay, I'm going to just pop a pin in here so I can keep this straight. It's a bit of a challenge because this is so small. So I'm going to pick apart a few more of these stitches just so I have more room to work with. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Hopefully you're able to see this. So I've overlaid the two pieces or two ends of the binding strip, and I'm going to just pop another pin in here. Okay, and so now what we need to do is we need to sew a diagonal line from this corner here to the top corner. And I honestly sometimes struggle with that. So let's see how it works out today. Okay, I should draw a line. I'm going to draw a line on mine just so that I can have a bit more control over what I'm doing. Okay, so that's not perfect. So now we're just gonna stitch across that line. My needle has come unthreaded. Okay, so now you want to just open it up and hopefully you've stitched it together correctly, and I did this time. Sometimes I get that backwards. So let's see, can you see? No. Here. Okay, so now I am going to just cut this with an approximate 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay. And I'm gonna finger press this. No, just leave it. Finger press it to one side. Okay, so now I have one continuous piece of binding. I've attached those two ends. You can see the attachment point here. And so I'm going to just now go back to the sewing machine, and I'm going to finish binding this strip here. Okay. Okay. So the binding is fully attached to the front of the placemat, and so now I'm going to just wrap it around all four sides, and I'm also gonna pin it. Well, not pin it, but I'm gonna clip it. Okay, so I have this all clipped together. So now I'm going to flip it back over, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch around the front to do the final attachment of the binding. Okay, let's go. completes today's project. So we were successfully able to take a pile of scrap material and turn it into this really super cute placemat. This placemat again is measuring at approximately 18 inches by 14. And so I think it's really cute. So this is the back of it and this is the front. So thank you so much for stitching with me today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more beginner-friendly tips and projects. If you have any questions about this project, feel free to leave a comment or send me an email and I'll be happy to give you more information. But yeah, I'm really pleased with today's project. Turned out pretty well. So thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.